Some days leave a man so tired. He starts to wonder if the sun's been chasing him instead of the other way around. That was how it felt for David. The July heat had clung to him since sunrise, pressing through his safety vest and baking the smell of asphalt into his skin. The highway crew had been out since dawn, shaping a new stretch of road through miles of quiet farmland. Machines roared, steel clattered, and dust turned the air the color of bronze. By the time the last truck rolled off-site, David could barely keep his eyes open. He leaned against his pickup, muscles humming from the day's work, and let the silence settle over him. Out here, even the wind sounded slow. He looked across the fields, waves of green broken by fences, barns, and a thin line of trees. Somewhere beyond that tree line, a river wound its way toward the mountains. He'd heard the locals talk about it during lunch breaks, how the water stayed clear and cold, no matter how hot the summer got. The thought of it pulled at him. A swim. Just him, the river, and quiet. No foreman barking orders, no engines, no heat-soaked highway stretching endlessly ahead. He tossed his gloves onto the passenger seat, grabbed a towel, and started down the dirt path that led toward the sound of rushing water. Gravel crunched under his boots. The deeper he walked into the woods, the cooler the air felt, scented with pine and wild mint. When the river came into view, sunlight scattered across it like broken glass. David stopped at the edge, breathing in deep. For the first time all day, the world was still, and he could finally feel his own heartbeat instead of the rhythm of machines. The river felt colder than he expected. David waded in, the water curling around his legs, washing away the dust and heat of the long day. He laughed quietly to himself. No one around for miles, just the wind and the steady rush of water. He glanced around once, making sure he really was alone, and decided to leave his clothes on the bank. The water felt too good to resist. He dove under, came up gasping, and floated on his back, staring at the fading orange sky. For a few perfect minutes, there was nothing but peace. Then voices, laughter. David jolted upright just as a group of young Amish men stepped out from the trees. They froze, wide-eyed, like deer caught in headlights. And then the laughter came, soft at first, then louder. One of them said something in Pennsylvania Dutch that made the others nearly double over. David could only grin, half embarrassed, half amused. "Guess this ain't the private spa I thought it was," he called out, splashing water toward them. That just made them laugh harder. The group eventually turned back toward the path, still chuckling, their black hats bobbing as they disappeared into the woods. But one of them, taller than the rest, quiet, maybe 18, paused before leaving. He didn't laugh. He just looked at David, eyes curious, almost thoughtful, like he wasn't sure what he'd just seen or why he couldn't stop thinking about it. Then he turned and followed the others, leaving the river still and silent once more. David watched the spot where they'd vanished, shaking his head with a smile. Well, he muttered to himself, that's one way to make friends. A few days passed before David found his way back to the river. The work site had moved farther down the highway, but he couldn't stop thinking about that peaceful stretch of water. And maybe, just maybe, the awkward audience he'd had the last time. When he reached the bank, the evening light was soft and golden. The air smelled of rain and fresh-cut hay. He kicked off his boots and sat on a rock, letting the river swirl around his feet. That's when he heard footsteps on the path. He turned, expecting maybe a fisherman or a farmer, but it was him, the same Amish boy from before. Eli. He carried a bucket and kept his eyes low, pretending to be busy filling it with water. But every so often, his gaze flicked toward David, quick and nervous. David smiled. "Don't worry," he said softly. "I kept my clothes on this time." That made Eli laugh, a small, shy sound that felt like it surprised even him. They talked a little then, about the river, the weather, the road construction nearby, small things, but the kind that matter when two people are testing the edges of something new. Eli said he came to the river often, that was quiet here, away from the noise of the farm and the rules that filled his days. David understood that more than he expected. As the sun sank lower, neither of them seemed eager to leave. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore. It was gentle, easy, and full of something neither dared to name. That night, as David drove away. He caught himself smiling for no reason at all. And back by the river, Eli watched the headlights fade into the distance, hoping the man from the highway would come back again. The summer storm came without warning. One moment the sky was gold and calm. The next, dark clouds rolled in from the west, swallowing the sunset. David was already at the river when the first drops began to fall. He almost turned back when thunder cracked in the distance. Then, through the curtain of rain, he hurried down the path. No coat, no hat, only determination. By the time he reached the river, the rain was falling hard. David waved him over. "You'll be soaked." Eli laughed. Too late for that. They ran for cover beneath the old wooden bridge. The air smelled of rain and pine. Water echoed all around them. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Eli said quietly, "I shouldn't be here." David asked, "Do you want to go?" Eli shook his head. No. The silence that followed was full, alive, with everything they couldn't say. Their shoulders brushed as they shifted closer under the narrow bridge. And then, in the quiet between thunder and falling rain, their hands met. A soft, hesitant connection. A shared glance. And just like that, their lips touched, brief, gentle, and perfectly awkward. The kind of kiss that promised more without saying a word. When the rain finally slowed, they stepped out together. Eli smiled faintly. Maybe storms come for a reason. David didn't answer. He just watched him walk back toward the trees, his heart calm and racing all at once. The days that followed felt longer. David's mind kept drifting back to the river, back to the bridge, back to Eli. He remembered the storm, the shelter of the old wooden bridge, and the way Eli's lips had met his, brief, hesitant, and unforgettable. Every evening, he found himself driving the same dirt road, thinking about that moment, wondering if Eli felt it too. He remembered the warmth of the kiss, the nervous laugh that followed, and how something inside him had shifted the instant their eyes met. For Eli, the river had always been a quiet place, a world away from rules and chores. For David, it had become the place he first realized he wanted more than just fleeting moments. He wanted to see Eli again, to know him beyond the storm, beyond the stolen hours. And one evening, as the sun dipped low, there he was again. Eli stood by the riverbank, his horse tied nearby, a small bundle of belongings in his hands. David's heart caught in his chest. "You leaving?" he asked softly. Eli nodded. "My family thinks I'm visiting my uncle's farm. I just need to see what's out there, to see who I am when no one's watching." David studied him, feeling the memory of their first kiss like a quiet fire inside him. He saw the hesitation in Eli's eyes, the pull between the life he knew and the life he longed to explore. "If I take that road you're building, will you wait for me at the end of it?" Eli asked, voice barely louder than the wind over the river. David smiled, small, honest, and steady. "I'll be there, however long it takes." He could still feel the warmth of that first kiss, the spark that started it all, and it made him know he meant every word. Eli lingered a moment, as if deciding between the safety of the path he knew and the unknown that waited with David. Then, slowly, he mounted his horse, looking back one last time with a shy, hopeful smile. The evening breeze stirred the water, carrying their reflections together before they drifted apart. David watched Eli ride toward the horizon, glowing with the last light of day, the memory of the kiss and the promise of more echoing in his chest. And though he didn't know when or if they'd meet again, he knew one thing for sure. Some people you don't plan to find. They just step out of the trees one day, and suddenly your whole world changes.